She walked into the courtroom expecting another ordinary day. Case files stacked, gavel ready, routine justice. But when Judge Eleanor Hayes looked up at the defendant's table, her heart nearly stopped. Standing there was James Anderson, the boy she once played with on summer afternoons, now accused of a crime that could destroy his life. The years between them had carved different paths, but fate had brought them face to face in the most unforgiving of places. Was this just coincidence, or something far more haunting about the system they both grew up in? What unfolded next would leave the entire courtroom, and you, speechless. Eleanor Hayes had built her life on discipline, determination, and an unshakable belief in the law. As one of the youngest judges in her district, she carried the weight of every case like a promise to uphold justice, to give voice to those who felt unseen. Her mornings began in quiet routine, black coffee steaming on her desk, case files spread neatly in rows, and the familiar rhythm of the courtroom waiting just beyond her chambers. She wasn't just respected, she was admired for her sharp mind and her calm authority. To most, Eleanor was untouchable, a symbol of fairness in a system that often tilted the other way. But beneath her polished robe and composed demeanor lay the same memories that shaped every child from her neighborhood, dusty streets, endless summers, and friendships that felt unbreakable. One of those friendships belonged to James Anderson. They'd been inseparable once, running through fields and dreaming of futures bigger than the world around them. But time had scattered those dreams, pushing Eleanor toward college, law school, and the bench, while James faced obstacles she never had to navigate. Their lives had diverged, yet their shared past lingered like an old photograph tucked away in a drawer. And now, on an ordinary morning in court, fate was about to pull that photograph back into the light. Eleanor had no idea what name would be on the next file she opened, nor how it would shake the very foundation of her belief in justice. The moment Eleanor's eyes fell on the defendant's chair, her breath caught in her throat. James Anderson, not just another name in a file, not just another case. It was the boy she once knew, the friend she hadn't seen in decades, now sitting in handcuffs, shoulders heavy, eyes dulled by years of battles she couldn't yet imagine. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but Eleanor heard nothing except the pounding of her own heartbeat. She forced her face to remain calm, but inside, questions raged. What happened to him? Why was he here? And why did his file look like a roadmap of failures stacked against him? The charges were serious: theft, assault, resisting arrest. On paper, James looked like a man who had spiraled into crime. But Eleanor knew better, at least she thought she did. She remembered his laugh, his kindness, and his dreams of becoming an architect. Yet here he was, labeled dangerous by the very system she had sworn to serve. As testimony unfolded, cracks in the case began to show. Witnesses contradicted one another, evidence felt circumstantial at best. But what chilled Eleanor most was the way the prosecutor painted James, not as a man, not as a person with a history and a family, but as a stereotype. A black man from a rough neighborhood who fit the profile. Each word was sharpened like a blade, designed to cut away humanity and replace it with fear. Eleanor's stomach tightened as she realized what James was truly up against. This trial wasn't about facts, it was about perception. The jury shifted uneasily when the prosecutor lingered on James's record, emphasizing arrests without convictions, suggesting a pattern that wasn't there. Eleanor saw it clearly. The unspoken bias threaded into every argument, every insinuation. James sat silently, his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. To the jury, it might have looked like defiance. But Eleanor knew that look. It was the same one he wore as a child, when he was blamed for something he hadn't done. It was the look of someone bracing for impact. The pressure built with each passing minute. Every piece of evidence stacked higher, every insinuation heavier. Eleanor found herself gripping her gavel tighter than usual, her mind torn between duty and disbelief. She couldn't intervene, not yet. Judges were meant to remain impartial. But how could she sit there and watch a man she once called her brother be buried alive by prejudice masquerading as justice? The courtroom air grew thick, heavy with tension. Eleanor knew the trial was moving toward a breaking point, but what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that one revelation still lingered in the shadows, waiting to turn everything upside down. The turning point came when the prosecution unveiled its smoking gun, a grainy security video. On the screen, a man in a hoodie darted across a dimly lit parking lot. The prosecutor's voice boomed, "That's James Anderson," clear as day. The jury leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The clip was short, blurry, and far from definitive, but it didn't matter. The narrative had been planted, and Eleanor felt the weight of it crushing down on the room. She glanced at James. He sat motionless, his face a mask, but his eyes betrayed a storm of rage and despair. Then came the gut punch. The prosecutor revealed prior arrest records, moments from James's past that had never led to convictions, yet were paraded like trophies. Each one framed him as reckless, dangerous, unworthy of trust. Eleanor's knuckles whitened around the bench. This wasn't justice, it was character assassination. The defense tried to object, but the damage was done. Eleanor looked at the jury. She saw it in their faces, the shift, and the quiet surrender to a story written long before James ever entered the room. The presumption of innocence was gone, swallowed by bias that clung like smoke. In that instant, Eleanor felt powerless in her own courtroom. She was a judge, sworn to uphold fairness, but she was also a friend watching a man's life unravel under the weight of a system rigged against him. The silence after the prosecutor sat down was deafening. James didn't look up, didn't speak, and didn't plead. He simply lowered his head, shoulders heavy with the realization that his truth might never be enough. And in that moment, Eleanor knew, the next words spoken in this courtroom could decide not just James's future, but whether justice itself still had meaning. The verdict arrived like a stone dropped into still water, guilty. James's shoulders slumped, the sound of his mother's quiet sobs echoing through the courtroom. Eleanor's gavel struck, but her heart sank with every thud. The law had spoken, but truth had been suffocated beneath the weight of prejudice and perception. After court adjourned, Eleanor sat alone in her chambers, staring at the empty chair where James had just been. She couldn't stop thinking about the boy she once knew, the kid who shared sandwiches at recess, who dreamed of becoming an engineer, who laughed louder than anyone else. That boy had been crushed by a system designed to doubt him before he ever had a chance. The impact stretched far beyond the courtroom. James's story became another reminder of how justice bends unequally, how race can tilt the scales in ways too many prefer to ignore. For Eleanor, the gavel no longer felt like a symbol of authority, it felt like a question mark, one that haunted her. Had she upheld the law, or had she been forced to witness its deepest flaws? This wasn't just James's story. It was the story of countless lives derailed by assumptions, by systemic biases too ingrained to be seen until it's too late. And so, the haunting question remains, how many more James Andersons will it take before justice truly means justice for all?